Good afternoon, colleagues. We begin with the adoption of the agenda, and if I could submit the following changes to the draft agenda. Point 6, which is the presentation of the draft report on the functioning of the the rapporteur, Carlos Coelho, will postpone it to the Libya meeting of the 8th of March, and if there are no objections, the agenda is adopted. On linguistic profile, we won't have interpretation in Croatian and Gaelic. And on delegated and implementing acts, on the 26th of February, the Commission adopted a new delegated act. And this was as regards the inclusion of certain drug precursors in the list of scheduled substances. You've received this document in your newsletter of the 2nd of March. There is an internal Libya deadline for any member of Libya to raise an objection in the usual way. Secondly, on the 28th of February, the Parliament received a Commission implementing decision laying down specifications for the connection of the central access points to the entry-exit system for a technical solution to facilitate the collection of data by Member States for the purpose of generating statistics on the access to the EES data for law enforcement purposes, and 2 annexes. You've received this document in the Libe newsletter of the 2nd of March 2018. An internal deadline for proposing an objection was set. In case any member wishes to raise an objection, please inform the Libe Secretariat before 16th March 2018. And the approval of minutes for the 15th of June, they are approved. If there are no objections to the minutes, they are approved. So, colleagues, we come to point 4. And one of our main items this afternoon, and I'm delighted to welcome Isla Sender, Mrs. Sender, for this discussion and joint debate. And she is the chair of the, and she's chair of the EP Maghreb delegation, and also the vice chair of the Committee on Foreign Affairs of AFET. Mr. Kuzo Permi, and both of them are most welcome to the Libe Committee. So, colleagues, this is on the very important issue of the current situation in Libya, and I'm very happy that we are doing this in a joint and holistic way on a very serious topic. We had proposed just recently to have a delegation visit to the region with the EP Maghreb delegation. We were not able to go, so I'm very pleased we have this initial briefing. We're also going to have this afternoon a debriefing from the External Action Service. And I'm going to, without further ado, get a briefing from Mrs. Sender, and then Mr. Permi for short introductory remarks to kick off the debate.
Can you please give the floor first?
Sorry, I've just been informed that Mr. Permi is going to take the floor first. So, Mr. Permi from the AFET Committee, please kick off the debate on Libya. Thank you.
I will speak in Spanish. Bueno, agradecemos esta oportunidad de...
Thank you very much indeed to give us this opportunity for us to have this debate with a body which is so important, the UNHCR, on the question of migrants in Libya and elsewhere in the world. And they certainly have the full support of the European Parliament. The setting up of the joint task force in November last year between the EU, African Union and the United Nations was a very important step in the light of the dramatic situation of migrants in Libya. We've seen clear progress over the last few months. More than 9,000 migrants have gone back to the country of origin, and more than 1,200 refugees and asylum seekers have been evacuated from Libya. But there are still thousands of refugees and migrants living in Libya, many of them in very difficult situations, very often enclosed in detention centres. and there are efforts being made at international level to protect them, but nonetheless we have to further up that effort for those who need international support. In order to achieve ongoing results on the situation of migrants in Libya, we have to intensify our efforts in order to find a sustainable political solution to the Libyan crisis. The EU supports the efforts being undertaken by the United Nations for an inclusive political process led by Libya and facilitated by the United Nations. Our committee is continuing to monitor the situation. We're currently in contact with the Special Representative of the General Secretary, Dr. Ghassan Salameh, in order to set a date for a debate in the course of a future meeting. Finally, our colleague Panseri from the S&D group, unfortunately, has not been able to join us here today. A few weeks ago, he submitted a draft recommendation to Libya on the Council and Commission, and we should have a debate on this report on the 23rd of April, and the vote is planned for the 24th. With no further ado, I will give the floor to Mrs. Ayala Sender.
Sí, muchas gracias.
Kiitoksia.
Thank you very much indeed to the Vice Chair. I would also like to welcome the presence of the High Commissioner for
Meillä on nyt tämä UNHCR:n
on refugees at this joint meeting, and we would support all of their efforts in their activities, which are of great importance for us in Libya, which is a country of great concern where there's a lot of tension as well. And we look forward to be able to work together with the United Nations in a comprehensive manner that will take account of the entire country, as well as everything that's happened in the past and what we hope will be the future of this country. We shouldn't take the country in a fragmented way, in separate parts or for different issues. We have to take it as a comprehensive whole so that we can have an integrated view. In the meeting we held on the 25th of January last, where the Maghreb Interparliamentary Delegation was involved as well, we had an exchange of views with Mr. Piquet, as well as with representatives of the UN in the IOM in Libya. And in the course of that discussion, we learnt some very positive pieces of news. In respect to the number of people displaced within the country, which is a serious problem as well, given the circumstances and the work which has been conducted by the various different NGOs and UN, a lot of these people have started to move back to their own homes. That's good news, although there are new and further needs as well to have prevention, for example, the question of mines, and we also have to help in identification. There was a high-level mission in which the UN, EU and African Union all took part in Tripoli, and again that provided with some very important information as to how we can enhance cooperation with the Libyan authorities so that we can establish a better response to all of the problems. So that's why we're very interested to hear to Mr. Piquet and also Mr. Maldou about the outcome of that delegation. And I would also like to inform you that the Conference of Presidents has once again confirmed an ad hoc delegation to Libya in as short a term as possible, particularly taking account of the security situation, which has been rather problematic over the last few weeks. And that delegation should be headed by the chair of the Interparliamentary Delegation for the Maghreb and should include the chairs of the committees concerned, AFET, Libya and Human Rights. We've started to prepare the ground for that very important mission, and as soon as we have any specific information available, we will make sure that that's forwarded to you as well. Thank you.
Thank you to both of you, and Now I'd like to give the floor to Ms. Carmen Sacker, Head of the North Africa Unit of UNHCR, to give us some information about the state of play of the UNHCR's work in Libya.
Hello. Thank you very much for inviting us. This will give us the chance to explain a bit more what UNHCR is doing in Libya and what is our priority and the axis of our interventions. This is a very important opportunity. I will start by explaining quickly what are UNHCR's priorities in Libya. They divert over 4 priorities, mostly strengthening the relationship with the Libyan authorities, and responding to the humanitarian situation that is prevailing in the country. We are trying to expand our programs in a very volatile country, including the areas where we have restricted access to, enhancing UNHCR engagement with the IDPs, internally displaced population, the host community, and as well as the returnees, the former displaced population. And finally, providing assistance to our population of concern composed of refugees and asylum seekers. I will go a bit into details about each of these axes, but it's important to start by saying that Libya is not the easiest of contexts where we can work due to a changing security situation and dynamics. Despite all of that, we have been working in the country since 1991 for the past 27 years. Since 2014 July, along with the rest of the UN system, we have been operating from Tunisia. That being said, UNHCR never left Libya. We continue to have a presence through our national staffing in Tripoli and in Benghazi. And since 2016, UNHCR have had regularly international staff going on missions and continued its activities related to the registration, documentation, and identification of vulnerable persons of concern that required international protection. Our population of concern ranges between 500 and 550,000 individuals that are divided into 3 categories. The internally displaced population, that is around 180,000. Then we have the returnees that are around 340,000. And then we have 47,000 refugees and asylum seekers. And since 2016, UNHCR have registered around 10,000 asylum seekers, despite the security evacuation status that was imposed on all of the UN system. One of the challenges that we face in the country is the restriction when it comes to nationalities. UNHCR have always been asked to only deal with 7 nationalities. For if not aware of those nationalities, we're talking about the Somalis, Sudanese, Eritreans, Ethiopians, Syrians, Iraqis, and Palestinians. Despite this restriction, we have regularly been engaging with discussions with the Libyan authorities, and lately we have had the opportunity to intervene on also Yemenis and South Sudanese. On IDPs, UNHCR have been increasingly more and more involved. We have increased our budget and our areas of intervention when it came to the Sabrata emergency, and lastly, lately, with the Tawerga situation. We have been very much involved and regularly providing assistance to around 1,220 ITPs, 300 or 400 families from the Tawerga that are trying to return to their hometown but have been prevented due to the fighting. They are based around 50 kilometers southwest of the Tawerga and east of Sirte. We've been providing them with non-food items, tents, water, and winter clothing. we plan in 2018 to implement around 200 QIPs, which is quick impact projects that will benefit both the host community, the internally displaced, and also the refugee population, and that is in a way to strengthen their resilience of the communities. On refugees and asylum seekers, we co-lead the Mixed Migration Working Group along with IOM. We have a presence in 12 disembarkation points, along with our partners in providing assistance. 6 of these disembarkation points are coordinated with IOM. On top of that, we are working also with the Libyan Coastal Guard on all of the issues related to capacity building, identification, and referral of people in need of international protection. For the emergency transit mechanism that has been put in place since November, it's just important to highlight that as of November last year, most of the decisions of the Libyan authorities to release people from detention was based on the condition of evacuating them. And therefore, UNHCR has put in place an emergency transit mechanism where we are transferring the most vulnerable people that are released from the detention centers to Niger. So far, we have evacuated 1,334 refugees and asylum seekers directly from detention centers. 1,020 have been transferred to the government of Niger that has been very open and hospitable and cooperative with UNHCR when it comes to the most vulnerable. And 312 have been directly evacuated to Italy, where the government of Italy has taken the responsibility when it comes to their protection and their refugee status. One of the issues that is important to highlight is the dire circumstances and living conditions that prevail in the detention centers and the facilities. They are lacking proper sanitary facilities, ventilation, private spaces for counseling. There is no space for privacy when it comes to interviewing them. However, despite all of these challenges, UNHCR is doing its best to register them and identify the most vulnerable in order to evacuate them. On resettlement, it's very important to underline the need for more international solidarity when it comes to resettlement quota. We try to evacuate or intervene with the Libyan government on behalf of the most vulnerable. However, once they are released, we need to find solutions for them, and this is what we have been advocating for. Legal pathways, legal channels, and resettlement quota. In December 2017, UNHCR launched an appeal for 1,300 resettlement places this group of 1,300 are the ones that we have been evacuating through the ETM, Emergency Transit Mechanism, to Niger. And so far, UNHCR has received a total of 1,100 confirmed pledges, and out of which 450 places are provided by the European countries, which is very much appreciated. However, there is a need for more places and for more solidarity. If we are planning to resettle between 5,000 refugees and 10,000 refugees, UNHCR can work on the identification and on the cases. However, there is a need for the countries to come forward when it comes to accepting these cases. Niger so far has received the 1,020. However, they have only seen 25 individuals leaving to France after the interviews. We were advised that until more people leave Niger, we will no longer be able to evacuate additional cases from Libya. This is why it's important to show also the governments that are standing in solidarity with the refugees that the international community is willing to take on this responsibility. finally, it's very important to highlight how important it is that UNHCR continues to have access not only to the 7 nationalities and the additional 2 nationalities working in Libya, but all people that are in need of international protection. IOM has been working on evacuating and returning people from detention. We have been restricted to certain nationalities. That doesn't mean that the others that are in detention, but from nationalities coming from the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, from Central African Republic, from other nationalities might not need international protection or have some needs. Not necessarily all of them are in need of protection. It's important to highlight that we need to have a proper screening mechanism to ensure that no one that cannot return back home is returned. I think on that note, I will just thank you again for inviting us and leave the floor if there are any questions for UNHCR. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sacker. There may be questions later, but thank you very much. We want to now get a brief debriefing from the joint EU-African Union-UN task force which visited Libya on the 22nd and 23rd of February. The task force, just to remind colleagues, had been set up in the margins of the African Union-EU summit last November with the purpose, of course, of saving and protecting lives of migrants and refugees along the difficult routes which we've been discussing and which the UNHCR has been discussing. So for this we have Mr. Morgi from the Commission and Mr. Piquet from the External Action Service. We're very happy to have both of them with us. So if I first take Simon Morgi from the Commission. Simon, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Perhaps just for one point for the record, just let me allow to flag that much of the detailed projects and activities that our colleague from UNHCR just described are very much being funded by EU funds. I think it's important we underline that because this is a difficult engagement with a difficult partner, and sometimes I think the impression is allowed to grow that the European Union is only engaged in more repressive measures and the protection side of what we're doing and the generous funding we're providing to the UNHCR and the IOM is sometimes overlooked. If I allow me to just give you a sense of the mission, we managed on the 21st to the 23rd of February to travel both to Tunis but also to Tripoli, together with the African Union Commissioner for Social Rights, together with colleagues from the UNHCR and the IOM, and with my colleagues Christian Leffler from the External Action Service and Maciej Popowski from DG NEAR. I think this was a fairly important mission. It was the first mission at a high level to Libya for quite some time. It allowed us, I think, to follow up some of the discussions that had taken place in the EU Abidjan summit. And what I thought I would perhaps try and do with you is both give you a sense of the discussions we had, who we met, but also perhaps a brief overview of the latest state of play from our perspective. During the trip, we were able to see the Libyan Foreign Minister, the Deputy Interior Minister. We were able to see the chairman of the Border Security Team, the heads of the 2 different Coast Guards, the director of what's called DCIM, the detention centres for what our Libyan friends call illegal migrants. We were able to go and visit one of the centres, Tariq al-Sikar, which is located very close to the centre of Tripoli. We were also able to visit one of the IDP centres. I think it was useful both to have the political engagement, but also to give a sense of, for example, the conditions in the camp, seeing it at first hand, even if this is probably the centre that's closest to Tripoli, and therefore I would suspect perhaps the best of all the centres. It still gave you a sense of the difficult conditions that people who are in the centres have to face. Let me start perhaps with the overall situation at the moment. If I look for 1 second on the central Mediterranean route, so we start by looking at the numbers of people arriving in Italy. If I take the figures as of the arrivals of today, we're now down 66% compared to where we were on the 5th of March in 2017. So there's been just over 5,000 arrivals into the European Union so far this year. there are a couple of things that are of interest. First, if you look at the countries of departure and you break it down, we've had until the end of February something like 3,700 people arriving in Italy from Libya. So still the vast majority of people arriving are coming from Libya. But we've seen a very significant increase in the number of arrivals from Tunisia. Tunisia is now over 1,000, just under 1,100, very much second place. This is much stronger than was the case last year. If we look at the nationalities arriving as well, also quite interesting. Obviously, strong continued presence of Eritreans. They account for 1/4 of all the arrivals into Italy so far this year. But in second place now is Tunisia, 1/5 of all arrivals. And very, very interesting, for the first time, we're now beginning to see arrivals from Libya, of Libyan citizens. That's something we had not witnessed in significant numbers up until this year. Now, in terms of some of the work and some of the discussions we had, as our colleague from UNHCR flagged, one of the things that is also working, backed by EU funding, is the evacuation of refugees out of Libya, with 1,334 refugees out of Libya. And I think today in Paris there is a meeting on the resettlement efforts, where I think one of the points that the Member States have also flagged is they can and are willing to resettle more, but they could also do with a bit of help in speeding up the processing of the individual claims by the UNHCR colleagues on the ground. We're reasonably comfortable that we have enough pledges to be able to cover the full resettlement requirements. You'll recall, and we've spoken about this earlier in this committee, that of the pledge we launched in September last year for 50,000 resettlement places from Member States, we've already had responses from Member States of around 40,000, with still 1 or 2 big Member States left to pledge. And of those, around 7,000 pledges cover the profiles on the central Mediterranean route, with specific earmarking for pledges from Niger, Libya, that I think can cover our needs in the short term. We've got over about 3,500 pledges there, so I think we're covered for the foreseeable future. But we need on all sides, Member States side, but also on the UNHCR side, to see a speeding up of this delivery, because we don't want to see Niger feeling trapped and stuck, and they've been reluctant to see themselves becoming a permanent solution, which I think we should have a great deal of understanding from. Equally important has been the work which we have done together with the IOM, and again funded by the EU, which has allowed just under 20,000 people to be successfully returned home from Libya in the course of last year. And we're on track, I believe, to have hit the targets that we set at the Abidjan summit, which was to get 15,000 people returned after the end of November. Still much more to be done. If we look at the detention centres, one of the things we see is that the numbers are going down. It's a very inexact science, and one has to be very careful when one quotes figures here, because you also have detention centres that are not controlled by the government. But our understanding is of a snapshot of the situation, and this is also the statistics and figures that the IOM are using, is that in September 2017 there were 22,000 migrants in these detention centres under DCIM control. Today there are only 5,000 left. And this was one of the things that we pushed during the mission, to encourage our Libyan counterparts to try and make sure that the numbers of people who are still in these centres today can be radically reduced. So we supported very much the call that the UNHCR colleague made, that the extension of the 7 nationalities that UNHCR are able to work with needs to proceed fairly quickly. Another very, very important point for us was to ideally get rid of the need for exit visas, or significantly shorten the time that is needed, as this has been an impediment to getting people out of Libya and either home or to Niger if they're not able to return home and are in need of protection. Interestingly enough as well, last week there was a signal from the leadership of DCIM that they would be interested in seeing all of the centres closed. I think this is something we now need to pick up on and explore. It's a difficult one for us. The extent is, do you go in and renovate, repair, try and get the people in there in these conditions that are there today, which are frankly not good. I took one or two photos during my visit, and as I say, this was probably the showcase centre, and it's certainly not a showcase centre which I would want to spend time in, nor see any of my family in. So I think we've still got to further push on this. Another important element was to continue work on the creation of what I would describe a comprehensive and traceable system for both the registration and traceability of migrants. One of the things we've seen with the Libyan Coast Guard is they have now, in the course of last year, rescued some 31,000 people. This does explain why we've seen a fairly significant reduction in the loss of lives in the Mediterranean Sea. But I think it's quite important to know who is being rescued by the Libyan Coast Guard, where they are disembarked and where they go to, and that we have a system which allows in particular IOM and UNHCR to be then undertaking their work to offer protection, to offer voluntary return. So this was something we pushed quite hard on with the government. We saw some opening. One thing again that would help is that we also have standard operating procedures adopted, which will set out exactly what happens and who does what at a point of disembarkation, where we've got operating procedures that have been prepared by IOM and UNHCR, and I do think their prompt adoption would be quite an important step towards putting in place this fully fledged registration and traceability system. It goes without saying that we also made the point quite strongly that we would like to see further steps taken towards relaxing at times what appear to be arbitrary detention decisions and moving progressively, gradually, from a detention system to a system of reception. One again of the, I would say, direct results of the mission, and a very positive result of the mission, was that the Libyan authorities did hand over to our UNHCR colleagues a letter authorising them to resume the rehabilitation of the transit facility in Tripoli, which would be a first step towards seeing such alternatives in place. And I think in particular we pushed very hard on the need for children and vulnerable individuals to be provided with alternatives to detention. Again, pending this, I do think we have to be willing to spare no efforts to improve the conditions of people trapped in the detention centres until we've got these alternatives in place. Last point that I wanted to flag, we also had a detailed discussion on the kind of support that we're offering to the municipalities. This week, the Trust Fund Operational Board meets, I believe it's on the 7th of March for the North Africa window, and that should give the green light, if all goes well, to a €50 million project for the EU Trust Fund, which will be implemented by the Italian Cooperation Agency together with UN agencies, and aims to support some 24 municipalities along the migratory routes and beyond. In terms of anything else to flag, one other last point I wanted to flag on the Libyan Coast Guard. One of the other points we raised quite strongly with our colleagues, apart from the disembarkation, was also the importance to see now the effective monitoring beginning to take effect. As some of you may be aware from the briefings that my colleagues in the External Action Service, and maybe Vincent may want to say a word more on this, we've been trying to put in place a monitoring scheme working on three strands. First, on information collection. Second, on allowing the remote monitoring at sea in international waters. And then thirdly, having periodic review meetings with the Libyan Navy Coast Guard and the Operation Sophia personnel. I think this is important because it will provide to the Libyan staff as well feedback. It allows for training on the job and mentoring, and it allows also, with the support of UNHCR, who've been providing, again with our funding, some human rights related training to the Libyan Coast Guard to see the impact of this. And then it also allows us, I think, to have some assurances as to the way in which personnel who've been trained with EU funding are operating. I'll leave it there. There's much more that could be said, but I think, in short, I would say it was a productive mission, one in which there was a good dialogue, and one which I think we should see as a start of a process. and hopefully one that will allow us to have more impact moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mordew. And now from the External Action Service, Mr. Piquet, please. Could I ask maybe between 5 to 10 minutes, because there will be a number of questions from members as well. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much, Madam, Mr. Chair. I shall be very brief because I think Deputy Director General Mordew has been very precise and detailed about some of the actions that we are engaged on right now, as well as on the results of the joint visit to Tunis and Tripoli by the Commission and the EEAS, jointly with the African Union and the UN agencies. We're working very much in the framework of the results of the Addis summit between the African Union and the European Union, the summit that set up the joint task force on migration matters between the three entities, and a summit that objectively has created a new window of cooperation for addressing the problem of irregular migration in Libya. We see that in several ways. First of all, thanks to the summit, the Libyan engagement has been much more pragmatic and proactive in discussions with us and the design of policy steps. And secondly, we have felt a much greater cooperation and direct support from the side of African countries who are the countries of origin of the irregular migrants in Libya. So in two very concrete ways, this summit has been, and the setup of the task force has been extremely effective. Example also from the side of the Libyan authorities is that the migration working group that Libyan authorities have run jointly with the IOM has been much more effective, has been able to address a lot more different issues, and has turned into the beginning of a real platform for dialogue and priority setting for the future. What does this mean for EU action other than what was described by Mr. Mordew? I can mention a few points from the side of the EEAS. First of all, I should mention the fact that the EU Border Assistance Management Mission for Libya has set up its presence in Tripoli since December and is now fully operational there, which allows the EU Border Assistance Management, EU BAM, to be a lot more effective in developing the cooperation projects and activities with the Libyan authorities, ranging from the Interior Ministry to the Justice Ministry, as well as the various border guards, maritime as well as terrestrial. Secondly, in the wake of that, also our EU delegation, still officially evacuated to Tunis, but has been gradually following on EU BAM in also setting up a presence, not yet permanent, but still a presence in Tripoli. And in the meantime, our delegation travels to Tripoli, if security allows, once or twice a week. Operation Sophia continues its work at sea. It continues to rescue migrants there who try to make the perilous journey towards the southern shores of Europe. It continues to provide training to the Libyan Coast Guard, training not only on the handling of irregular migration or migration at sea, but also training on human rights-related aspects, and as well as aspects relating to humanitarian law. And we do so together with the Office of the in cooperation with the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. both EU border assessment management as well as the EU SOFIA, EU NAFOR Med are up for renewal this year, and the feature of that renewal discussion will very much include the migration dimension. Lastly, of course, we need to continue to recognize that cooperation with Libya on migration continues to be heavily constrained by the instability in the country, the unstable and imperfect governance, as well as the insecurity in the country. There have been some improvements in that regard of late, but at the end of the day, of course, the security situation continues to be very volatile and prone to very rapid changes with all the practical consequences as a result for cooperation projects. So what it means for us is very much that we need to continue to work together with the UN for achieving a lasting political solution for Libya, a solution for its governance to be implemented through elections once the conditions for that allow. Stability also through the unification of all the military or paramilitary groups under a single civilian command, which is a major task, as you know, but a vital one if one is to create a law-based, rule of law-based country inside Libya. We will continue to roll out, of course, on migration, the various activities that were hinted at in part by Mr. Mordew, the new project for the municipalities along the migration route, and other projects for strengthening border management. And lastly, I should once again mention the regional dimension, that is to say, our intention to continue our dialogue and cooperation with the neighbours of Libya on the west, on the east, but particularly also on the south, in the Sahel, and beyond in the sub-Saharan countries, in order to also work there on the root causes of migration, on which of the problems that we are faced with in Libya as at present. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go straight to the members, starting with Mr. Stetina. A couple of minutes each, please, if you can. Thank you.
Thank you, President. Ladies and gentlemen, please use your headphones since I'm going to speak Czech. First of all, I would like to thank Mrs. Karen Sacher for the presentation concerning UNHCR and all pieces of information that she has provided us with. I'm a shadow rapporteur for EPP for the report of our committee that is being prepared at the moment with recommendations to the Council and the High Representatives concerning the further steps in this country. I highly appreciate what you have done in this country already, and in my amendments I have already mentioned all your activities concerning emergency evacuation, for example. I have supported all those activities of yours. 2 questions, if you allow me. It has been mentioned that approximately 5,000 people are at the moment still in government-controlled detention centres. Do you have any idea of how many people are at the moment held in those centres that are not controlled by the government at the moment? So this was the first question. Second, Mrs. Carvan, could you quantify how many of your activities in Libya are being financed or co-financed thanks to the European funds? So once again, the second question, do you have any specific idea the first question, how many people are held in those centres that are not controlled by the government? And the second one concerns the share of the UN funds on your activities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I actually have very many questions on this topic, and I want to thank the guests for being here, and in particular UNHCR. I know, and I've met with colleagues from you who have told me how difficult the work is that you are doing there. So I go straight on to my questions and concerns on the voluntary returns that IOM are organizing. I understand the UNHCR does not have access to all these people and to screen them if there are people that risk refoulement. So they have the IOM's voluntary returns program where the UNHCR does not have access to the same centers in order to ensure that there is no refoulement taking place in those returns. And then I also am of course concerned about the limited nationalities that you have access to, and I want to know what we can do and what we should be doing in order to improve that situation. Because again, of course, this is a de facto risk of refoulement, or actually even certainly so. Another point that I want to know a little bit more about is the disembarkation points. What happens to the people there? Are they transferred to detention centers, or what kinds? And have you access to ensure that these are not, so that people that need to ask for asylum can do so? And I was interested to hear that there is a protocol of a cooperation, or I don't know what the Commission called it, and we would like to see that, of course. I would be very much interested to see what that looks like, to see how you have divided the tasks and who is doing what in those disembarkation points. And then, if we have discussed here in the Libya committee, the centers, and I think these are basically prisons we're speaking about, and the EU should not be funding those prisons. I think it's a shame on us that we are doing this. So where is the progress on opening these centers? Where is the progress? And finally, and very importantly, I think in this context, is the reports of human rights abuses by the Libyan Coast Guard, as you call them. End of the last year, 50 people died, reportedly from human rights abuses of the Libyan Coast Guard. Have the Commission investigated into these cases? And what are the plans? Because I know you have reported that there are plans to have a maritime rescue coordination center in Libya, in an unstable state that has no sense, has no capacity for the rule of law, and you want to make Libya responsible on its own for a SAR zone in the Mediterranean. I think it's completely irresponsible, and I want to see if there is any update on that. So those are my concerns and questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, Judith Sargentini, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. My sincere thanks to the UNHCR and the effort you're bringing to get these refugees out of these detention centers. Now, I would like to understand which member states now actually have pledged places for those refugees you brought to Niger, and that, as you said, need to leave there as well, because it is bringing them to Niger was not a solution for the rest of their life. I find it very difficult to understand that one side of us is still not pledging this resettlement, and the other side of us is training Libyan Coast Guard to stop people trying to cross the Mediterranean. These two do not add up. If we do not deliver on resettlement, we seem to constantly continue busy with stopping migrants and refugees and not saving lives. As long as Libya is not considered a safe country, or Tripoli or ghost harbours in Libya are not considered safe harbours, I think it would clarify that real cooperation with that state is out of the question. Why are we training the Coast Guard to rescue people? It's because when you rescue a person on a boat with a European flag, you can't bring them ashore on the Libyan side. Everybody understands that. Hence, we train the Libyans. And as long as this is the routine, it also just proves that it's not a safe harbour. Otherwise, we could have brought the people to the Libyan harbours ourselves. It will always be dangerous on Libyan boats, because if you are taken off a little dinghy or out of the sea by a Libyan boat, you know you're going back the wrong way, and you know you might end up in detention. This can never keep people quiet and peaceful and voluntarily go on board of a rescue vessel. This automatically leads to unrest and probably violence on a boat like that. And if we then actually still don't know what happens after disembarkation, the only conclusion we can have there is we should not be cooperating there. And second, we are incredibly hypocrite if we do not clarify resettlement from Niger. Thank you.
Thank you. Bodo Valero, please.
Thank you very much. I am also reading your mitigation or risk mitigation strategy, and I see that you in the UNHCR, you highlight also the role of the NGOs and merchant ships and so on in the rescue work in the SAR. But this Friday I met with an organization, an NGO, working with search and rescue, and they told me that there's still the discussions on criminalization of their work, and that they are still accused of being a pull factor for migrants to go to cross the Mediterranean. So, and of course this was discussed a lot a year ago when the boss of Frontex, he went out to say something in that direction. But I would like to hear about the situation now. Is this really as bad as they told us, or what's happening in this moment on the question on search and rescue?
Okay, thank you, Bodil. And may I take a final question? I'm really sorry. It's very frustrating that we don't have, or we're running out of time, and we have the Commissioner next, unfortunately. Not unfortunately having the Commissioner next, but you know what I mean. This is such an important... No, I didn't mean that. This is such an important issue, and we're up against time. So, Birgit, just a final brief one, please, because we want to hear the answers on these.
Thank you very much, Chair. I will try to shorten it. I have no doubt that those people whom we tend to call a Libyan government try to do their very best. But if we look into the disastrous situation both for refugees and migrants, but also for Libyan citizens themselves, I don't know how they really can organize it. And if we talk about the so-called Libyan Coast Guard, that they are yet not well equipped and not well trained, first question is, where are our member states to really support them? Second, I fully can understand that migrants fleeing these camps in Libya don't want to go back on a Libyan Coast Guard boat, maybe to be brought back into that situation. So I think the solution needs to be that we take away those migrants, refugees, asylum seekers from Libya. But taking them out of Libya, and if I understood the numbers correctly, there are around about 500,000 people, but only 40,000 that might be ready for asylum that are in need of international protection. And I'm very sorry. I feel ashamed that member states are not pledging for those people. We are a continent of more than 500 million citizens. 40,000 people shouldn't be a problem. So to fund Libya with the camps is not helpful. I'm looking forward to find other solutions, and I really would like to hear more from UNHCR, but also from the Commission, from External Action Service, what really is going on and what really can help in the current situation and in the long run.
Okay, thanks. And some of the Libya responses are based on a delegation that went out via Tunisia, of course, where the UNHCRs, and we were with them, and we met the Coast Guard and so on. So, Ayala, just please, I want you to just say something before we hear from the colleagues.
Thank you very much, Chair. Very briefly, it seems to me from what the UNHCR has said to us and what Mr. Mordu has said to us, it seems that there is a bit of a mismatch. On the one hand, the UNHCR is saying that they need more places for the exit to Niger for financial reasons. But on the other hand, we're hearing that accreditation needs to be speeded up because it seems there is already supply. So I'd like to know how we can actually help to try to align the situation, better coordinate it. And I don't know whether the UNHCR or the Commission can tell me why all of a sudden there's been a huge peak in the number of Tunisians, whereas we've been able to get other nationalities no longer leaving the Mediterranean. So that's a very specific question I have for you.
Thank you very much, Ala. Obviously, we could have gone into far more depth, but let's get a snapshot answer from our colleagues, first from the UNHCR, to some of the specific questions and, of course, support that you've heard.
Thank you. I'll try to answer the questions that were addressed to UNHCR. On the question related to the 5,000 individuals that are still in detention and how many are held in centers that are not of governmental control, that is an answer that UNHCR does not have an answer to, because the non-sanctioned detention centers by the authorities are not centers that we have access to. They are not known to us. The only reality that we were faced with is with the Sabrata emergency, where we realized that there were 18,000 individuals between migrants and refugees that were detained in illegal centers when the Sabrata emergency happened. However, UNHCR and IOM have access to the official centers and not the unofficial or underground centers. So unfortunately, I cannot give you an answer, but what we know is that these centers do exist. How many of them are there, I don't know. Where they are, also, I cannot confirm. But when we get the information, we relay it immediately also to the government in order to go there and to see if the information is correct. On the activities that are funded by the EU, the EU is funding almost the entirety of the activities and the interventions that UNHCR has in Libya, whether we're talking about the evacuation mechanism, whether we're talking about transportation, shelter, staff, assistance, training of the authorities. It doesn't cover all of the interventions, but it has a budget in any of those UNHCR interventions in Libya. We have around 13 million euros from the EU Trust Fund for Africa that are being spent on Libya alone. And also there is an expectation that an additional fund will be coming amounting to 5 or 6 million euros that we will be receiving from ECHO and from the trust funds. Also, it is important to underline that for the emergency transit center that was approved by the Libyan authorities, also this is going to be rehabilitated thanks to the funds that we receive from the EU. On the limitation of nationalities and access when it comes to refoulement, this is traditionally related to when UNHCR was asked to enter into the country and to intervene further to the Somali situation and the crisis in the 90s. However, we have to understand that the Libyan society and the Libyan mindset is not very favorable when it comes to the understanding of asylum and refugees. For them, it is always linked to local integration, which is something that is very strongly rejected by the Libyan government. This is why traditionally we were given access to certain nationalities that we worked with and were resettling. So when I mentioned these nationalities, we had the traditional Arab nationalities that is based mostly on the principle of brotherhood. So they are most welcome into the countries like the Palestinians, the Iraqis, the Syrians. And for the African nationalities, it was based on the understanding that UNHCR will find for them a solution out of the country. This is where there is a need to work more on, and especially from the EU and all of the international community, on pushing for access for all other nationalities. Disembarkation and what happens to the people that are disembarked. As I mentioned, we have access to 12 disembarkation points. Some of them are coordinated with IOM. For those where we are directly present, the people are sent to the detention centers where we will go and register them, have the initial basic biodata, and assess the vulnerability based on which traditionally either we intervene with the government for their release and they go to the CDC, which is the community centers that are run by UNHCR. But since the government decided that we need to evacuate, so these people are identified and then they are put on the list for the evacuation mechanism. For the last question that I can answer, because I know that we're restricted with time, which member states have pledged for cases from the Niger? We have France that has been already on 2 or 3 missions to interview cases. We have had Switzerland. There are other countries that are pledging, such as Italy. We have Norway, Sweden, and Malta, and other non-EU countries. However, the issue is that when they will be able to interview these cases and when the security checks will come through for these cases to move, which is very lengthy. This is why so far we have had only 25 individuals physically leaving from Niger to France. I hope this answers the questions that were addressed to UNHCR. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And my apologies to Mrs. Jourova for the overrun. This is a quite sensitive and important point and some specific questions put by members. If I could just ask Simon Mordew and Mr. Piquet, between them, to tackle these. Sorry that your time is a bit compressed on obviously very sensitive issues, but you're experts, you've done this before, so if you want to pick up on some of the key points put by members, I'd be grateful. Thank you.
Very quickly, overall numbers, it's an inexact science. One thing I'll just flag to you is the IOM have just updated their own report from last month, in which they come to the conclusion that there is probably around 750,000 migrants currently in Libya. This is an increase from their previous estimates, not because the numbers have risen, but they've actually just changed the methodology underpinning that analysis. I would underline, however, that not all of these people are wanting to go to the EU. Many have actually travelled to want to carry out work in Libya and have got caught in difficult conditions. On the resettlement pledges, just very quickly, to clarify on the EU side, we've got 40,000 pledges in total. This covers both the Eastern Med route and it also covers the Central Med route. Now, if I look at the Central Med route and the 14, I think it's 14 nationalities or countries associated with it, we've got around 7,000 pledges in from member states. Of those, specifically, 3,425 are pledges which could directly underpin what the UNHCR is doing at the moment on the emergency evacuation mechanism. We've got pledges in from Italy, from Sweden, from France, but we've also got other pledges that don't have a geographic tie to it, around 1,300. So I am confident that at the moment the EU pledges can underpin the numbers that UNHCR have in Niger and are planning to have in Niger in the foreseeable future. What can we do? Well, today, as we speak, there is a meeting of what is called the UNHCR Core Group on Resettlement from the Central Mediterranean, which is chaired by France, taking place in Paris, which is looking in particular what more can we do together, both on the side of UNHCR, but also on the side of EU member states to speed up resettlements from Niger and make a success of this. And my own Commissioner, Commissioner Avramopoulos, will travel as well with a number of Ministers of the Interior to Niamey. I think it's on the 16th of March, again, as part of this engagement. I was grateful for the clarification from the colleague from UNHCR on the funding, because I do think it's very important to underline the EU is trying to pursue a holistic approach. Last week, to give you another example, we adopted a proposal worth some €115 million across the different windows of the trust fund designed for protection of refugees and migrants, with the bulk of that money going to be implemented by UNHCR and IOM. Just quickly now on the Coast Guard, one of the other reasons why I believe it's quite important to train the Libyan Coast Guard is because actually many accidents occur within the territorial waters of Libya. So we didn't have a Libyan Coast Guard that was able to conduct any rescue operations a year and a half ago. They had no vessels. We have, with the support of Italy, returned a number of the vessels that were in Italy. We've trained, I think, around 251 of the Coast Guards, and we've put in place a fairly strong vetting mechanism, which is allowing us to ensure that people who perhaps have question marks against them will not benefit from EU training. The next step is to really get this monitoring mechanism that the colleagues in the External Action Service are overseeing in place and operational. But there's no doubt about it. This is saving lives, and people are being rescued from flimsy boats which would otherwise have capsized and where they would have lost their lives. It's a difficult one. It's a difficult call. I recognise that. The same also applies on the detention centres. Of course, our policy is not to underpin the detention centres, but using some of our limited funding, the IOM has been getting in, making sure people get emergency health treatment, medicines, food, water. The option is that or not that. It's not an easy one, but this is the choice that has been made, and it is, I again think, saving lives. Of course, with the policy objective that such centres should be closed down and transformed into more open reception centres, and that we should have as our policy objective that people don't feel the need to try and risk their lives crossing the Mediterranean Sea. But we have a generous resettlement offer, and we have voluntary return programmes to their home countries that work and is effective. I would, I think, end there. That probably covers the key points.
It's getting difficult because the Commissioner is also waiting and people have come in for this. Judith, we're in a really difficult situation. I want the External Action Service to do their 2 minutes as well. Please, Mr. Piquet, just go ahead. And just 2 minutes, please, because we're under a lot of pressure. We've got the Commissioner waiting.
I understand. Thank you, Chair. On the funding of the detention centres, just to confirm what was said by Mr. Mornew, the EU does not fund the functioning of the detention centres. The High Representative has been very, very clear that she wants these centres to be closed, and the support we are giving in Libya is through the international organisations and is aimed to alleviate the conditions of those held in the detention centres, and not the funding of the centres as such. The other question was on about, do we investigate human rights violations? Yes, we do. We do query the authorities and ask them to investigate when we do suspect cases. The High Representative has written to a number of members of the European Parliament on a case relating an NGO vessel incident back in 2017. I hope you have received her answer, but it is a very clear example of the way we proceed in such matters. Lastly, do Member States give us support? Yes, they do very much. Examples are the EU NAVFOR Sophia operation in the Mediterranean. No fewer than 9 member states have allocated assets to that mission alone, assets as well as personnel. EU BAM, the Border Assessment Management Mission, is staffed largely through secondees coming from member state administrations. And lastly, of course, I should mention Italy, which has been particularly proactive and supportive in rolling out the approach towards the migration of the management of the irregular migrant approach of the EU. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it was inevitable once you had got the responses that it would give rise to more questions. But is it a burning thing? Right, just do it in 30 seconds and then I'm going to wrap up.
Thank you, Chair. There is no European resettlement at the moment. We heard the UNHCR give a list of member states that pledged. Then we get an answer by the European Commission suggesting that there are 40,000 pledges there, of whose, 3,425 direct for Niger. But the European Union or the Commission as such does not resettle at the moment. So if this is not being unsaid, I mean, if he says this, somebody needs to respond and say, this is wishful thinking, but those numbers aren't there. Please, could the Commission respond to that?
Okay, Mrs. Jourova is going to kill me in a minute for this. We've never... Look, in Libya terms, 15 minutes is like an hour overrun. I know other committees overrun by 15 minutes, but we don't do that. Okay, I don't know if the Commission and... Simon, are you up for that? Right, go for it.
Jourova is nodding that it's okay for me to reply, no problem at all. Well, I do think actually resettlement is taking place, funded by the EU budget. We've resettled something like 26,000 people in the last 2 years, and very concretely, as I believe our colleague from the UNHCR said, some 312 people have been resettled a couple of months ago directly from Libya to Italy, each and every one of those underpinned by EU funding. We offer €10,000 per person resettled. The people that have been resettled from Niger to France have also been funded by the EU, and we've also had, I believe, 2 people resettled out of Libya to a UNHCR emergency transit centre in Romania. So these pledges have been submitted. They're submitted within the framework of an EU coordinated exercise underpinned by EU funding, and the meeting in Paris today should hopefully allow for an acceleration and many more people to be resettled.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to thank Ines Ayala Sender in particular for Chair of the Maghreb delegation, because we're going to go directly to Libya, and I want to thank her for her work. I want to thank the AFET committee, Mr Permwe, because it's a holistic approach, so we're working with your committee very closely, and to Libe colleagues for a debate which, and to the Commission and External Action Service, thank you very much. And thank you for as good a debate as we could get. Thank you. And apologies again to Mrs. Jourova if she would like to come up to the front. Thank you. Colleagues, to save time, I'm going to start the introduction. If you're leaving, leave quietly, and if you're coming in, come quietly, and I'll begin the introduction 4.3.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
So, colleagues, this is the structured dialogue with Commissioner Jourova, Commissioner for Justice, Consumers and Gender Equality, and as she is coming to the front, I'm going to explain that this is the implementation of the 20... Please take your seats quietly. Thanks. I'm very sorry. It's the implementation of the 2017 work programme and the priorities for 2018. We're going to hear the Commissioner. There are a lot of... people seem to be chatting, but it's okay. It's fine. Bit of attention, thank you. There's a whole range of issues, e-evidence, EPPO setup, so many issues to discuss. But she's going to set out the priorities for 2018 and the 2017 work programme implementation. And then we'll have a round of questions and discussion. So, Vera, again, my apologies for the late start, and please go ahead.
Mr. Chair, honourable members, thank you for the opportunity to continue the dialogue with you. There is no need to give me any apologies because the topic is very, very serious and important, and I understand fully that you needed to finalise the discussion. But back to our topic. As this past year has shown, there is a great deal that we can achieve if we work closely together, and I would like to thank you for the excellent cooperation with the members of this committee, and you know that we had numerous dossiers that will have an impact on the everyday life of European citizens. Let me pause first on the 2017 achievements and current trialogues. Looking back to the achievements of the past year, the European Public Prosecutor's Office, and I will use the acronym EPPO further on. So the EPPO breakthrough certainly stands out. All our efforts must now be put into making EPPO operational as soon as possible and into trying to bring on board also non-participating member states. I am particularly happy that the Netherlands has decided to join the PPO, and I hope this will encourage others to follow suit. At this moment, including the Netherlands, we would have 21 member states, and I will invest quite a lot of my energy and time to convince the others to become the founders of the PPO as well. Another positive development is the outcome of the negotiations of the revision of the Fourth Anti-Money Laundering Directive, in which your ambitious political push proved very decisive. Thank you for that. I count on your full support in successfully concluding the dossiers that are currently under the co-legislator scrutiny, which is the mutual recognition of freezing and confiscation orders, the ECRIS third country nationals proposals, as well as the revision of the Regulation 45/2001 on the protection of individuals with regard to the processing of personal data by the institutions and bodies of the EU, and also the Eurojust regulation. I will be personally engaged in finalising these files, starting with my participation at tomorrow's first trialogue on ECRIS. Let me now share the views and current state of affairs on the General Data Protection Regulation application. Looking ahead, an important milestone awaits us on the 25th of May. I am, of course, referring to the entry into the application of the so-called Gdpr. In the Commission communication issued on the 24th January of 2018, we take stock of progress made for an effective application of the Gdpr and what still needs to be done by all actors, be it member states, data protection authorities and stakeholders, who all need to be ready on 25th of May this year. The Commission is engaged with all of them to ensure uniform application of the rules. This will be the key game changer compared to the current situation of 28 different national applications in the past and in the current situation, and we must try to ensure this one law for one continent principle. We issued guidance targeting especially small and medium enterprises and individuals so as to raise their understanding of the new rules in view of their application as of May 2018. It will be followed by awareness-raising campaigns so that citizens know their new rights and how to exercise them. We welcome the engagement of European Parliament key players on this very important file, especially in order to raise awareness and provide information in the member states. The GDPR is becoming more and more a model throughout the world, and many countries seek to emulate it. There is strong interest from various countries to obtain an adequacy decision, and we are now in talks with Japan and with Korea, which we treat as a matter of priority. Regarding Japan, we have agreed on a roadmap to address the differences between our legal systems. This includes supplementary rules that will help to bridge the gap. The current discussions with the Japanese side concern the content and technical details of this solution. Our objective remains to adopt a draft decision in the coming months, which will then be followed by the regular adequacy procedure. We will, of course, keep the European Parliament informed, including through technical briefings. Regarding Korea, we are intensifying the bilateral technical dialogue towards adequacy, but the assessment of Korean legislation is still ongoing. Dependent on the progress made, we would like to conclude these talks this year as well. Like Japan, we see Korea as a strategic partner and an example for the whole region when it comes to data protection. With our data protection package, we aimed to adapt the rules to the technological developments. We also need to do this in the area of criminal law, which is why the Commission will soon adopt a proposal on cross-border access to electronic evidence. More and more investigations today involve electronic evidence in some form or another. There can be terrorism cases, or child pornography, or murders, or trafficking of human beings, or kidnapping of persons. Many of these require immediate access to evidence, and the current framework is not quick enough for cross-border access to electronic evidence. Some member states have taken action to solve this issue on their own, but we need a comprehensive and solid EU approach. An approach that would allow judicial authorities to request e-evidence from a service provider in another member state, while taking account of the principle of proportionality and ensuring adequate safeguards. The proposal will be drafted in full accordance with EU data protection rules and the respect of fundamental rights. I look forward to discussing the proposal with you once the Commission adopts it. I would ask for your support for a timely treatment so that an agreement can be reached before the European elections. In parallel, my services and I continue to keep a close eye on developments in the United States, in particular the recently published draft Cloud Act. This is the act clarifying lawful overseas use of data, as well as the Microsoft case. I will go to the United States in 2 weeks' time and discuss this with the US government, industry and civil society. I am committed to engaging with US partners to find mutually acceptable solutions that improve access to electronic evidence while respecting international law and considerations of international committee. I also intend to insist on the need for the US to comply with all their commitments under the Privacy Shield and the recommendations we made following the first annual review. While some progress was made since this review, there are further steps that need to be taken by the US side, and you are very well aware of them. My tone with the US counterparts will be, this time, very tough. Moving on, another new Commission initiative, one that has already been put forward, I would like to bring to your attention the recommendation on illegal content published only last week. The recommendation takes a comprehensive approach to all types of illegal content, while acknowledging their specificities and identifying different solutions where required. It puts forward a set of safeguards to increase transparency for citizens into how companies make their determination about illegal content, as well as the right for citizens to send counter notices if they consider that the content removed was, in their view, legal. In doing so, the recommendation strikes the right balance between the need to take effective measures against illegal content and tackle terrorism content on the one hand, and the need to preserve freedom online and on the other hand. It is also important to note that the text fully reflects the fact that self-regulatory measures have proven their effectiveness, as shown by the results of the Code of Conduct on illegal hate speech with major IT companies. Allow me also say a few words on the rule of law, an overarching theme which I know is central to the work of this committee. I know that you will discuss this in depth with the first Vice President Timmermans next week. In its work programme for 2018, the Commission included a new initiative to strengthen the enforcement of the rule of law in the EU. The announcement of this initiative reflects our joint efforts to strengthen the enforcement of the rule of law and to promote and uphold our common European values in all member states. This proposal is planned for autumn and will draw lessons from the experiences of recent years. It will also take due account of the work of the European Parliament, including the resolution adopted on the 25th October 2016, which will feed the reflection. The Commission is also considering preparing, with the Austrian presidency, a conference on justice systems to be held in the fourth quarter of 2018. In the conclusion of my intervention, I would like to say a few words on the urgent need to pay closer attention to the situation of minorities in the EU. While there is no general self-standing EU competence on the rights of persons belonging to minorities, the Commission monitors closely that Member States respect, or if Member States respect, all applicable legal acts, in particular the Racial Equality Directive and the Framework Decision on Combating Racism and Xenophobia. We also assist in many different ways the Member States with their full and correct implementation. A concrete example of Commission action is the infringement proceeding initiated against several Member States due to the discrimination of Roma children in education. This autumn, we will present an in-depth evaluation of the EU framework for national Roma integration strategies. This evaluation will assess its implementation, achievements and also challenges. More importantly, this evaluation will feed the reflections about possible directions for the EU action in the post-2020 period. We will also continue to work to advance LGBTI equality. The second report on the list of LGBTI actions, published a few days ago, shows that most of the actions proposed in 2015 have been implemented successfully. Nevertheless, available data unfortunately indicate that discrimination based on a person's sexual orientation or gender identity is still widespread. I am therefore very glad that we have recently awarded grants to 17 new projects in 21 Member States under the Rights, Equality and Citizenship Programme, with the aim to further promote equality by supporting civil society organisations and grassroots activists that need it the most. I look forward to hearing your views on these and any other topic you may wish to raise, and I would like to thank you once more for your extremely valuable work and our very close and fruitful cooperation in the area of justice and civil liberties. Thank you very much.
And thank you also, Vera, for your work. It's an enormous portfolio and for the ongoing cooperation. Before I go to coordinators, could I just raise an issue, if it's not going to be raised individually by members, on the e-evidence file which you raised. There are some concerns which you'll have started to hear on this. I mean, the first thing obviously is if there's a delay, what's the nature of the delay? And I mean, it's no secret that there are concerns about the treaty basis, whether it's going to be 82, which is judicial cooperation, which is what we would want it to be under, given the huge concerns there are about how this will be treated. It's a new thing. It's got huge problems if it's going to be in the internal market area and if it's going to be 114 under the treaty. So this is the main concern. It's the concern I'm hearing from colleagues as well. So if you could give us some more information and when the proposal would come out. So if I could just raise that immediately, thank you. And go straight to the coordinators now with Mrs. Metsola.
Thank you. Today, thank you for your excellent work. Now, we know there are many important issues that must be dealt with, as you've also just told us, in the field of justice and home affairs. But at this crucial juncture in the development of our European project, we believe that there is none more crucial, more urgent, or more wanted than the need to ensure that democracy, rule of law and fundamental rights are upheld in every single member state of the European Union. And when, Commissioner, last October you gave a speech, I believe it was in Finland, you underlined that this is the right moment to do something to strengthen the rule of law mechanisms. You were absolutely correct. Since then, the situation has become even more critical. In Malta and now in Slovakia, we have anti-corruption journalists being assassinated. These were not run-of-the-mill murders. These were vile attacks on the media, on the freedom of expression. And we know that journalists are only assassinated when inherent weaknesses of institutions will allow it. Now, in some states, the situation has deteriorated to such an extent that while certain reforms and legislation may tick all the right boxes on paper, their implementation is either inexistent or the laws are so selectively used so as to be bordering on the incredulous. Now, on paper, things may look one way, but in practice, they are exactly the opposite. And this, frankly, highlights a new situation we are facing in Europe and one that we must address and respond to. And this is not about any one individual member state. It is clearer than ever, however, that we need a concrete, independent and expert-led rule of law mechanism that will put all member states on the same level of scrutiny automatically and every year. Justice scoreboards, anti-corruption reports can and should be part of it, but ultimately what my message is here is let's take politics out of protecting people's freedoms. So my question to you would be, is the Commission able to commit itself to implementing such a mechanism, which was requested by this Parliament just over a year ago, by the end of this year? Thank you.
Thank you, Roberta. And I should mention to colleagues that are not aware, there's a Cont Libe delegation to Slovakia the day after tomorrow, which I think is a timely response from the committee, which I think is a good thing. For the S&D, Mrs. Sippel, please.
Thanks a lot, and thanks to Commissioner Jourova to touch upon so many important questions that are in her portfolio. And let's see how many points we can ask questions to. I will concentrate on maybe 4 or 5 points, and let me start once again with the rule of law. I think this, for years, is a demand from this Parliament, and unfortunately, we never got a clear answer how we can improve the situation. Roberta Metsola already mentioned Malta and Slovakia, but to be honest, I think in the long run, the developments in Poland are also worrying, and I don't see that so far the Council is responding to the Article 7 procedure, which should become a normal procedure under friends to warn each other that things are going wrong. Even worse is the situation from my point of view when it comes to Hungary, because we never officially were able to raise serious concerns that really can be seen, at least when it comes to corruption and the use of EU funds. So is there anything in preparation to improve the situation, and do you believe that we do need, as European Union, more powers to get a good reaction and a fast reaction and reply from our member states? Coming from that, I would then shift to, this will not be a surprise for you, to the Privacy Shield. Many actors have criticized that still there are some points of concern. One is the question of the ombudsperson, and the Article 29 working group criticized that this cannot be considered yet an effective remedy before a tribunal. And they already set a deadline to the 25th of May, warning that they also could go to national courts and refer the matter to the European Court of Justice. So what steps in this situation is the Commission, or has the Commission undertaken to remedy the situation, and are you confident that the deadline of the 25th of May will be met to resolve the situation? Another question linked to e-privacy is the Section 702 of the FISA Act that was recently reauthorized, strengthening powers of US intelligence agencies on surveillance of non-EU citizens. So from this, what is your assessment regarding the impact of this reauthorization on the legality of the Privacy Shield? And 2 short questions on PNR. First is, what are the implications of the EU-Canada opinion on the EU PNR? And how much money has the Commission already spent to prepare the still awaiting EU PNR? And one very last question on GDPR. I do see a lot of loopholes in the member states to implement the GDPR. So my question would be, are you ready to move to infringement procedures immediately against member states that have not timely responded to implement this package?
But on this GDPR point, there's also the issue of individual small businesses, SMEs, not being ready and so on. So maybe if you could widen maybe the response to that, because we're near the time, and we've had a national parliaments meeting and so on. So that's a wider point than even member states' enforcement. ECR, Mr. Stevens is not here, but Mr. Jurek, do you want to speak on behalf of the ECR, please?
Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much, Madam Commissioner. Thank you very much for coming to our committee meeting. It is always very good to have a direct conversation about the policy of the European Commission. I have two questions. The first one concerns the position of the Commission in terms of direct democracy. Right now, Romania is organizing a referendum, is trying to organize a referendum concerning the natural definition of family and putting it into the constitution of the country. There was almost million citizens in Romania asking for such a change. Now politicians are putting pressure to bear to the government of Romania, and they want to stop the referendum. They don't want it to happen. I'm interested in the approach of the Commission to this issue. I, of course, understand that you're not going to intervene, but I am kind of curious about what do you think about this fact that people want a change, and what is going to happen here? Now my second question, fundamental rights and the approach of the Commission to the parental role in upbringing their children. We know that the Charter of Fundamental Rights has the Article 14, which treats this right, the parental right, as one of the basic rights for the parents to bring up their children the way they see it fit. And Madam Commissioner has already mentioned certain expectations related to, for example, LGBTI. So I'm interested, what do you think about the approach to family? As such, there were ideas to introduce in schools certain elements of the curriculum about how to treat a family, how to define a family. I can see that there is a discussion. Apparently, not everyone is equally represented in this discussion. So maybe there is a question about minority rights here.
Aldi, Sophie, can you speak for Aldi, please?
Yes, thank you. I'm very happy that there are more and more countries where people actually consider that it's none of the business of the government whom you can love and marry and have children with. But apart from that, I would like to, I'm not going to repeat all the questions that have been put by Birgit Sippel and Roberta Metsola about the sections 702, PNR, the DRF Pact. There's one question in particular that I have addressed to you by way of letter, together with a couple of colleagues, about the proposals of the US government for setting up a national vetting center, where it seems that all databases are going to be connected, and those databases will also contain data of European citizens. And this seems to be contrary to all the agreements which we have with the US, which in themselves are already not legally watertight, to put it mildly. So I heard, and I came a little bit late, for which I apologize, but I heard that you intend to be very firm with the United States. I think that's good news, because we have been not nearly firm enough in the last 15 years or so in this area. The second issue is, and I've raised this a couple of times with you, the litigation fund, which the European Parliament has written into the budget, and I would really like to know what the state of play is with the implementation, because you know my concerns. I get the feeling that your services are not actually very keen on a litigation fund, and they're trying to weaken it. And then one last remark, and this is not to do with the policies of the European Commission, but this is about the credibility of the European Commission when it comes to being the custodian of the treaties, in particular in the area of democracy, the rule of law and fundamental rights. I think many European citizens are very, very dismayed at the recent appointment of the new Secretary General of the Commission, which has been approved by the College of Commissioners. I hear that Mr. Selmayr has plans not only for his own future but also the legal service of the European Commission. And I keep getting emails from citizens who are saying, how can I have trust in the European Union, in the project, if the most powerful institution of them all is acting in this way? I would really like to understand how we can be credible if the Commission, and not just as an administrative body, but the political College of Commissioners, has approved this nomination and the way that it has happened. I would really like to understand that.
And Cornelia Ernst for GUI, please.
Ja, vielen Dank.
Thank you. Well, this is a huge repertoire that you've put to us today that we need to discuss. And if we're looking at the question of the rule of law, as colleagues before me have said, I can see that the EU is drifting apart, whereas the USA are now tightening up, and that's creating a new situation which has brought us to the edge of economic clash. So the question arises there as to how we can negotiate anything on privacy issues, for example. How has the situation changed? What can we expect? I'm hugely pessimistic about this. I don't want to paint things blacker than black already is, but I think that really the situation is truly unsatisfactory. And second, the data protection package, well, great. It's supposed to come into force on the 25th of May. All of it, normally e-privacy and also the regulation which would apply at European level for the European institutions, in other words. But what we're seeing, I can see this from the latest dossier, is that there is a total blockage from the Council that would want the data protection lifted for certain specific areas, Europol, for example. So how does the Commission deal with that? In other words, that the proposal is for all the agencies, the bodies, and the law enforcement agencies as well, that logically they should be regulated under these provisions as well, but then basically it's being pushed to the side by the Council, which is standing in the way of entire dossiers and ensuring that this will not be implemented in due time. And of course then the pressure will grow continually. Well, it's a disaster of trust, I would say, between the Council and the Parliament here, because basically people are playing, obviously, for time and trying on this idea of harmonization of data protection in all sectors and law enforcement to sweep it under the carpet. The last point, you talked about Roma children and discrimination. Well, that's often been an issue. You were talking about integration strategy and saying that that needs to be reviewed in the autumn. Yes, I think that's good, but the question is it enough? How are you planning to call for stricter measures? Because it's a total scandal that there should be this Roma discrimination. It's going on in some form or another in almost all of our countries. And so people are asking, what is anything being done? Have you got any binding measures planned not ones that would simply be left up to the will of the member states. Thank you.
Please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Let me start by thanking the Commissioner for the new projects on LGBTI. Seeing that the European Commission supports gay prides in European member states, supporting civil society to combat hate crime, to be able to talk about gay marriages in different European member states. I think that is very important work, and I'd like to underline that we're very happy with you pushing those proposals through. It leads me to another issue around anti-discrimination that we seem to be struggling with, both Commission and Parliament. The horizontal equal treatment directive that nobody has heard of since, I think, 2009. Would you see any movement there in the Council? And is there anything still that Commission and Parliament could do together? The other question I want to address is the Victims' Rights Directive. I understand that we negotiated that already in 2011. It was officialized in 2012, and in 2015 every member state should have had one. I understand this is not the case, and you are worried about that as well. Are you considering infringement procedures there, or have infringement procedures started? And content-wise, because the Parliament at the moment is also evaluating, would you happen to have an overview of how member states made sure that there would be no discrimination between victims with and without paperwork? Article 1 of the directive clarifies that discrimination on the basis of residence permit should not be taken place. It's something I feel it's very dear to my heart to make sure that we implement that well. And I wondered whether you have more information there. I thank you for your compliments on the work on the anti-money laundering directive. I think what we put together now also with the Estonian presidency is indeed an enormous improvement. Still, there are a lot of member states that have not put in place AMLD4, and you have been sending letters out already to a couple of these member states, but are we moving into a next phase? And this is a crime-fighting tool. I recall member states really wanted us to get a move on, and it's painful to see that a lot of member states have not, including my own, the Netherlands, have not yet implemented the previous one where we already finalized the next one. And finally, Chair, we're entering the debate around the multi-annual financial framework, and I wondered whether we can see proposals coming by the Commissioner on conditionality under the multi-annual financial framework when it comes to rule of law. There's a lot of European funding going to countries that seem to have a very flexible approach to respect of rule of law and fundamental rights, and I think this would be the moment to take up that debate. Can we see such proposals in the near future? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anna Maria Corazza-Bildt, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Commissioner, also for your initiative and commitment to combat illegal content online. It's really very welcome. It's in line with the report of the European Parliament also on sexual abuse of children and protection of children online, and I'm sure that you will, as you have been so brilliantly participating and supporting the Safe Internet Day and all the initiative the Commission took on that day, consider also to continue to put pressure on the industry, also on removing material that is illegal containing sexual material abuse on children. I also very much appreciate your commitment to the Istanbul Convention. Last week, President Tajani opened the plenary with a very strong statement in favor of ratification of the Commission by all the member states. And there I would like to ask you, what is the state of play on the conclusion by the Council of the EU accession to the Convention? And also the Parliament had asked the Commission to engage in dialogue with the Member States that have not ratified, that have oppositions and reservations. We know how the debate is in some of the Member States now. Even the Bulgarian presidency has frozen the ratification, and all is around the interpretation of gender and gender-based violence in the Convention. So I really hope that we will continue to work together and join forces, and I would ask you to please make a step with the Bulgarian presidency to put it on the agenda of the Council during the Bulgarian presidency. I also would like to raise my concerns for the e-privacy regulation. Trilogues are going on, and I really hope that the Commission will help and ensure that we balance the very high standards of protection of personal data, but without undermining innovation, and providing legal certainty, consistency with GDPR, and have a future-proof legislation that does not hamper the digital single market. And last, I really want to congratulate and welcome the project you have just announced to us to support anti-discrimination for LGBTIs. I would like to say once again that I regret that the Anti-Discrimination Directive is frozen in Council. And I would like to ask you if anything is happening, if we can have any hope to move forward within this mandate. Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Thank you. And Christine Revaud-Dallon-Bonnefoy, please.
Merci, Président. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner. As my colleague and co-rapporteur on the signature and ratification of the Istanbul Convention by the EU has already said, I'm going to ask questions about this issue as well, because I'd like some very specific answers about the first point in particular. During the Council Working Group on Monday the 26th of February, can you tell us what was said on the Code of Conduct, which is so important and on which you have our full support in respect of this legal battle between the Council and the Commission as to what might fall under EU competence? As you know, we have also called on the European Parliament's legal services to provide us their own opinion, and they confirmed that the Union could retain more general competence than what is contested right now by certain member states. So how do you see the state of play with Bulgaria, as my colleague Koletz-Bildt was saying, Bulgaria having backtracked on signing and ratification of the Istanbul Convention? They are the Council presidency right now. So on that part, which is absolutely crucial, can we do anything over the next 6 months? If you could give me a very specific answer on that, please. Thank you.
Thank you. And Cecile Kienge, please.
Grazie, Commissaria.
Thank you very much indeed, Commissioner. Last week, the European Parliament adopted a report on the situation of fundamental rights in the European Union for 2016, and also noted that within the member states, the phenomenon of discrimination, unfortunately, is increasing. We're seeing that happening in various different member states, particularly for certain groups of people. For migrants, for Roma, we've already mentioned, and also, well, for migrants in particular, we are seeing that, well, there was a shootout in Macerata just a few weeks ago where 6 people of African origin were shot at, and the aim was to have as many Africans or victims as possible, particularly from people coming from Africa. And again, people are shooting at crowds, killing people, African people in particular. So there's no legal protection in order to bring a strategy to bear in all member states on this. And we've called for a European coordinator to be appointed within that report. The European strategy, as far as certain models are concerned, LGBTI, the Roma, Islamophobia, this type of thing. And I'd like to ask the Commissioner whether she continues to follow this on Afrophobia as well. And finally, I would like to conclude by asking the Commissioner if she will support our call for a European fund on human rights and democracy, because we're seeing that civil society, there are changes afoot there as well. Thank you.
And ahead, please.
Tack så mycket, och tack kommissionären för att du
alltid är lika pålitlig och kommer hit och svarar.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Commissioner. You're always ready to come here and take our questions. I have a question I'd like to put to you on the horizontal directive on equal opportunities. And if you'd already mentioned that, then I'd also like to mention the directive on trafficking in human beings, which should also have an equal opportunities aspect in there. We're seeing increase in human trafficking around the world, but we're also seeing a change to the way in which it happens. The Commission has presented a communication on trafficking in human beings, but we as a parliament, we don't agree on the strategy. As I said, the situation is evolving. The rules are changing according to which the human traffickers actually work. So does the Commission actually intend to revise its own strategy on this? Thank you.
Walker had indicated, but Mrs. Mitsula, are you going to give her question?
Thank you. Sorry about this, but Livia is stuck in traffic and would like to ask this question to the Commissioner, so I will ask it on her behalf. How do you envisage the post-2020 Roma strategy? What has the Commission learned from the current framework, and how has the progress been on Roma integration? What steps does the Commission plan to take, and how do you plan to upscale the framework after 2020, as was requested in the resolution adopted recently in the EP? Finally, how much was spent since 2011? What is the situation with the Western Balkan accession and Roma, and what about a better monitoring?
Thank you very much, colleagues. It's called a structured dialogue. It's not very structured. It's just about... Oh, Brigitte, have you got another question, just to make it even more unstructured?
It fits into the structure. I'm so sorry, but I forgot a question on GDPR. We had a lot of debates about GDPR, long debates. We also did a technical check on linguistic and legal questions, and now, some weeks before it needs to become effectively implemented, the Council starts to do a kind of corrigendum. I never heard something like this before, and I would like to hear what the Commission knows about it and what is your opinion on this concerning strategy of the Council.
I'm not sure what corrigendum. The Council? Yes. All right. Antoine says yes, definitely yes. Okay. Yes, definitely yes. Right. There's so many issues with that. Okay. So I'm very conscious there's about 1 million questions there, Vera, even more than usual, but then it's just the sheer breadth of the portfolio. So please go for it as best you can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We always say that next time we will narrow it a little bit to cover the things properly, but I will try to do my best to cover all the questions. First, you asked about e-evidence and the legal basis. So just to give you the idea about the timing, we should adopt the proposal in April. It seems to be the 17th of April now. It has been postponed several times. Why? Due to the complexity and new sensitive and rather controversial aspects which we had to tackle with and resolve. You asked about the legal basis, so we are considering Article 82, judicial cooperation in criminal matters. So it's one thing. The second thing on e-evidence, we have to balance the need to come with the pan-European tool which will enable the law enforcement authorities to get the e-evidence in cross-border area, which they cannot do now, and to do it based on the clearly defined scope. I said before that the evidence has to fulfill the requirement of proportionality. So we are still discussing now about the scope and the cases when this new tool, which is called European Production Order, will be possible to use. It's one thing. The second thing which we have to consider properly and come with the balanced solution is are the safeguards for the cases when the IT companies will be asked by law enforcement authority and there will be some doubts about the legality of such a request. We have to count with any possibility which can appear in practice. It relates also to the need to insist on goods or to come with a good solution with the regime which will go beyond the EU borders. And I mentioned it, I think, in my opening speech that I will discuss with my American partners also the regime of reciprocity, how to achieve the best solution, because we see that under current arrangement, a lot of evidence can be transferred to the United States, and we have to make sure that our law enforcement authorities will be able to get it. And there are still a lot of questions which we try to resolve in a balanced way, so that there is the requirement of being better in law enforcement well balanced with the need to protect the fundamental rights and to protect the privacy of people. One comment on the reaction of IT, because it's obvious that the judges and prosecutors wish to have such instrument. But the IT companies themselves call for more legal certainty and more solid rules which will give them the clear picture of how to behave in certain situation when they are asked by the law enforcement body for the evidence. I am sure we work hard on finalizing the proposal so that it withstand your scrutiny and your concerns, especially regarding the fundamental rights, but also the future scrutinies which may come, because as I said before, this is a very needed and very important piece of legislation which falls under the scope of criminal justice, but at the same time there are many question marks, and I hope we will do this right. We have been discussing the need to come with the rules with the Ministers of Justice since Dutch presidency, which was, I think, 2016. And the ministers are awaiting also impatiently. So I have to deliver after many discussions and very hard legal work. On related to it to some extent on PNR, which was the question of Madame Sippel, and on the implications of the European Court of Justice ruling for relations with other third countries. It is quite obvious that the Commission will need to redefine its global approach towards PNR agreements before resuming negotiations. Now, at this moment, we speak about the case of Mexico, or before starting negotiation talks with other third countries. And I am sure that you know that Japan is strongly seeking negotiations with the EU on PNR, given the upcoming Olympic Games there, so it's quite a hot issue. We will continue to explain to our international partners in informal talks the legal framework for transfers of PNR data to third countries as laid down in the Court's opinion, and we will also emphasize the need to combine the legitimate desire to improve the safety and security of our citizens with a high level of protection of the personal data. So I think that it is clear that also there will be the implication on other agreements and the court's opinion formally concerns the envisaged PNR agreement with Canada and does not affect member states' obligation to implement the PNR directive by May 2018. It's rather legalistic for me and also technical, but I think it's good to ask the same questions to my colleagues who do the home affairs, because it is under their remit. So this is the PNR question. On privacy shield, again related to protection of privacy. Yes, I said I will be tough this time. And I think I was also last time. I was there in March, and I had some understanding for difficulties they had after the change of administration. But I have emphasized many times on many places that Privacy Shield has been based also on the trust and then on a long list of commitments and tasks for all, including the Commission, but first of all the United States administration. We were quite clear in our recommendation, as well as the recommendation issued by the Working Party 29. That is the deadline. I am going to the United States with attracting the attention of all relevant people and bodies to the deadline. I want to stress that in the meantime, the United States have already implemented some of our recommendations. For instance, the recommended improvements of the certification process or the identification of the so-called false claims, and some other things. But what we want to see is the fully fledged working ombudsperson office. You know that this arrangement was offered by or proposed by the American side as the place, as the relevant body, as the independent body within the American administration, which will deal with the complaints of the Europeans in case they have suspicion that the law enforcement bodies accessed their data in the scope which is not legal. And we have to insist on having the person running this office, fully fledged person, and I will make clear that this is our tough condition, as well as the people being appointed to the PCLOP committee and many or some other matters. When I was in the United States in March last year, I heard from one high official that Privacy Shield is not high on the agenda, that it's not a priority. And I said, it will be the priority if we will make clear that we will suspend the system if it doesn't work. And I hope that now it's better understanding on their side. Whenever I meet representatives of the businesses, but not only American businesses, but European companies, they emphasize the need of having such legal arrangement. But I must say that my patience is coming to an end. So I am quite clear on this now, on this place, and I will do so also when visiting Washington. I will be well equipped with the legal analysis of what happened with 702, which was your question. What are other consequences of the new American legislation? I will ask my colleagues for a very thorough legal analysis in light of what we need to have guaranteed on the American side. I will hear the views of the US civil organizations, which I always meet because I also need the reflection from the side of the watchdogs, and I will hear the views of the businesses as well. But I believe that the EU has to be now tougher, and we have to come with the deadlines very clearly. On the same with Federal Committee of Trade, which has also very important commitments there. On rule of law, I will come back to to the questions. Yes, we need to strengthen the framework, and we need to strengthen it also by better defining what we mean by rule of law principle, that it is the basic principle that democracy and the democratic state must be based on. To my surprise, we have many people, including the official figures, who are of the conviction that if you win elections, the winner takes it all. And it's not true. The rule of law says clearly that the independence of judiciary and the balance of powers in the state is something which the political powers should keep untouched. Of course, there are different systems in the different member states. When I discuss with the people from the member states where we are more vigilant regarding rule of law, I hear always this same argument. There are different systems. There are the states where there is no constitutional tribunal. There are states where there is no council of judges. Yes, we have 28 unique systems. But these unique systems must deliver, must be based on the same principle, the principle of the rule of law. And this is what we mean by coming with the initiative of defining better not only what we mean by rule of law in the EU, but also what should be the mechanisms, what should be the new ways we work with data, what should be the ways of enhanced monitoring, and many other things. We will work with the ideas and the proposals which you issued in your resolution, because there are many very useful ideas and ways forward. And I am sure we have to do it to increase also the legal certainty in the EU. This is very much related to what I think Madam Sargentini asked about the rule of law conditionality for the future MFF. When I came with this idea, there was a lot of panicking in some member states because, of course, it was seen as the stick to only some, for instance, cohesion countries and so on. So at this moment, we say clearly, no, this should refer to horizontal funding, to all the money which is being distributed to the member state, whichever you can take, whichever member state. And we have to define how we understand the principle of rule of law, what are the main conditions of functioning of rule of law in the state, and we will combine it, or we will describe it by the functioning judiciary, functioning and independent judiciary system, and sound controlling and auditing mechanisms in the member states. So there will be the definition accompanied by more detailed description of what we cover by the rule of law in the member state. We have to be as concrete as possible so that to dispel the doubts that in the future there might be some arbitrary decision making, that we do not like some member states, so we will cut the money. I would never like to be at the beginning of such a mistake. But we have to do something with these conditionalities, and I am strongly convinced that we should forget about many other conditionalities for the EU money. And we should come with the simplification of the rules. And we should insist on the big things which matter. And I am sure this is it. This is the rule of law. On keeping a little bit more time with the EU funds and coming to your questions also in relation to Slovakia, well, if it will be proven that the EU money or the fraud and corruption on EU money is at the background of this horrible tragedy and horrible case, then we will see another urgent moment for establishing the EPPO, the European Public Prosecutor's Office, on time in 2020 and have this body as a specialized independent body which will deal with big financial crime in the EU, including the fraud and corruption on structural funds. I am convinced that we are doing the right thing here, and I want to invite other member states, especially we are still missing we are missing Sweden, Malta, Poland and Hungary. Speaking about the Netherlands in SPE, we hope that the Netherlands will join soon. And I think that especially in the member states where there is expected new big amount of money for distribution to cohesion projects, such countries, and I speak about Poland and Hungary, according to my view, should reconsider joining the EPPO, because I think it should be our common goal to combat against fraud and corruption on EU money. This is not only about the money, this is about the trust of the European taxpayers. And we will see where the Slovak case will develop further or evolve further. But and I do wish and I strongly hope that the perpetrators of this horrible murder will be caught and punished soon. But this is also the lesson to be learned, and we have to be good on establishing the EPPO. We have to be good on establishing the rule of law, conditionality for the future money, and also we have to be much better in protecting honest people, including the journalists, but also whistleblowers. And I can only inform you today that we are finalizing now the proposal for protection of whistleblowers, which will be the legislation, which will be horizontal, and which I hope will increase the chances for the honest people in case they see some wrongdoing which is detrimental to public interest to come and report and to have the guaranteed protection. I think that this is a very, very important plan. On EPPO there was not a specific question, so I will jump on the Gdpr. Yes, May deadline is coming close. We are now working on 3 strands. The first thing is we try to coordinate the work of the member states on the related legislation. The regulation is applicable directly, that's a clear thing. But there is a lot of relevant legislation in the member states which needs updating, and this is where the devil is in detail, because this is the way how our dream about having unified rules could be ended, because there is a space for deviations. That's why the Commission is very vigilant on several member states. We try to work with them so that they do not deviate from the spirit and the legal text of the regulation. At this moment, we have only 2 member states which have implemented or which have adopted the legislation. Some other member states, it's Austria and Germany, some member states are finalizing, and some member states will likely not be able to adopt the legislation on time. So the regulation will start implementation directly without the national legislation, which is meant to address the open space for specificities in the member states, which relates especially to the public sector. So this is one strand of the work. The second is vis-à-vis the businesses and small and medium enterprises. Many of them are very scared about the new rules. Many of them are scared uselessly, because all of them should do the risk assessment to what extent the GDPR, the new rules apply to them, but I think that they deserve better explanation, better advisory service, better and timely information to be delivered, and it's mainly the task for the member states and for the data protection authorities. The Commission tries hard. I get tens of mails every day with the questions how to implement the GDPR in my company, and I reply to all. But it's not my role. And in many cases, I might not be precise enough because GDPR has to be read in the member state in connection with the national legislation. So, but we issued the toolkit for the companies on the 24th of January. We came with the guidance. We will invest also more money into better awareness raising among the companies, and I believe we will get there over this year. And this is also, as I said, the task for the DPAs to be helpful to advise the companies how to be best prepared. The third strand of our work is vis-à-vis the citizens. GDPR is a quite robust piece of legislation, and it has very strong impact on especially on the business world and also on the public sector. And if the citizens will not exercise their rights, which they gained through GDPR, it will be in vain. So that's why we still have to we want to open the awareness raising campaign, and we want to do it also in connection and cooperation with the member states, DPAs and companies who are willing to cooperate on this, because I am sure that the companies themselves should inform their clients that they respect the new privacy rules, because what I heard 1,000 times from the business sphere, for the businesses to increase the privacy, the protection of privacy means to increase the trust of the clients. This is their asset. This is the competition advantage. So I believe that also the people in Europe will start understanding why we came with this legislation. On Istanbul Convention, it is a sad story indeed. This is a very practical and useful piece of legislation which is well targeted on all the horrible cases of violence against women and children, not only, and sorry to say it like that, traditional forms of violence. There is a doubt whether we should continue some traditions in the EU, but also the horrible forms of violence such as female genital mutilation and forced marriages and forced abductions and many other horrible things which should have no place in the EU in the 21st century. And that's why the EU itself joined the Istanbul Convention, and I would like again to thank you, to thank the European Parliament for supporting this so strongly. Especially I wanted to thank Madame, oh, you have that very difficult name, Dallon Bonnefoy, and Madame Maria Corazza-Bildt for all the efforts. Where we are now, still we have 17 member states already ratified. Some still are waiting, or in some member states there is a very heated debate. So I will take Bulgaria, for instance. It's not naming and shaming, but Bulgaria is the presidency country. So I think it's a good example. I am following the debate in Bulgaria, and I see that already the title, Istanbul Convention, creates passion, negative and hostile reactions. Then there is some difficulty with the language, with the translation. there is some interpretation of the text that the Convention wants to introduce the third gender or third sex, also the confusion between the word of sex and gender. It's not only in Bulgarian language. Now I speak about the languages where there is no differentiation between sex and gender. So you can imagine that there are several unexpected issues. I didn't expect that, I must admit. And then also there is a very strong feeling in some circles, and important circles, and among some stakeholders, that the Istanbul Convention could destroy the traditional family. And here I have to be better in explaining that what we want to achieve by means of Istanbul Convention and everything else we do, we try to eliminate the violence against women and children, the domestic violence, which is still very extensive phenomenon in all the member states of the EU, and that we need to have the convention ratified. Some member states, recently Slovakia, they want to go the way that they will not ratify, but they will pick up some of the elements and to introduce them in the criminal law. I still believe, and I hope, and I will do my best to convince them to ratify. This is the second best option, which I don't like. I don't want this approach, but I just want to share with you that some member states try to find at least some solution, which I don't agree with, but this is up to the member state to decide. On Roma, yes, another painful story, I must say. We have strategy for the EU, we have strategies for the member states, millions of words, millions of papers, and not big results. That's why I want to do the proper evaluation of the Roma strategy at the European level. I met the evaluators and I asked them to come with the true picture and to assess what works, what doesn't work. I will give you an example of the states where we run the infringements related to education of Roma children. And I must say at the beginning that of course I will continue the procedure of infringement, but I prefer to see the results on the ground. And for me, the results are not only the laws in place. I want to see some change. And when I analysed the situation in one of those three member states, and when I spoke to the teachers at school, when I spoke to the parents, when I spoke to the activists, when I spoke to the politicians, it became clear that the education cannot solve the problem itself. It's fine that we have in that country the School Act, which excludes the discrimination. But we need to work more with the families, we need to work more against unemployment and poverty, and we need to work more against segregation as such, not only in education. So this is the job for all relevant actors in the member state. And I don't like so much the words holistic approach because it's such a cliché, but here we desperately need it. And I will visit all the countries where we have problems with implementing of the Roma strategies over this year, and because I want to understand the problems which come from the practice. And we will rework our strategies so that there are things which will work. And it has also a very practical angle why we are doing it now, because soon we will speak about the concrete priorities for the new financial framework. We must not repeat the same mistakes, programming the money which will not help anything and anyone. We have to target the money better. So this is on Roma, on discrimination and also Afrophobia and all these issues. I think that the Commission is we are doing our best to make absolutely clear that discrimination is intolerable in the EU. We have the legislation in place. We have the framework decision on racism and xenophobia, which must have been implemented on all member states. We have a set of anti-discrimination legislation, and we have to push on equal treatment directive to be adopted. And you asked also about this directive. So where we are now is being blocked in the Council. So I want to have the discussion with the ministers in spring this year, and I expect that there will be again the arguments that it's going to be costly. And I want to update the economical figures we have, because this is the legislation back from 2008. And I understand this argument that without the updated economic analysis or impact assessment, we are not able to bring the contra-arguments that yes, it costs something, but the benefits also in terms of money are these and these. And that's why I want to devote a lot of energy in it this year. I will inform you, or you will know about how the orientation debate in the Council ended up, and I am ready to come back to it, to this point in the second half of the year. We all know that there is the option of enhanced cooperation, but for me this is not an option. It's too serious to choose only some member states, or to have only some member states on board. I have not replied on the questions of Mr. Jurek. Yes, direct democracy, I will give you my personal view. I have nothing against the direct democracy and referendums. Always it's important how the conditions are set up, and again my personal view is we should take some lesson from Brexit, because how easy it is to brainwash and to influence the people with fake news. It's incredible. And I think that we have to consider all the circumstances and consequences of the referendums, but it's on the member states to decide and to take responsible decisions. The same with family matters. This is the matter of the member states, so I will not give you any official position. Yes, the appointment of the Secretary General, thank you for this question. I didn't expect that. It was Sophie in 't Veld. She always has good questions. I must say I have not received any question from the citizens who are used to write me. They write me about poverty and about discrimination and about horrible criminal cases, and I didn't receive any question of this kind. So the Commission, the College endorsed the proposal, and that's it. So I cannot tell you more about that. But you see that I honestly came back to this question to say a few words on it. Have I skipped something? The data protection in the EU institutions. Well, we, as the Commission, work really very intensively on unblocking it, because we see the need to have this in place by the date of Gdpr coming into force. We came, I think, with very workable solutions regarding the law enforcement agencies, and I hope, and we will do our best to unblock it, because it's heavily needed. Yes, maybe. What's missing? Yeah, the same related to e-privacy. We need to finalize the trialogue.
Anna, what bit of it? Anna, what bit did Mrs. Jourova?
Equal treatment directive, I have just said that I will deal with this over this year. The discussion with the member states touching the reality where we are, but the positions have not changed since we had that last debate. I want to do it in spring. In the meantime, I want to refresh the macroeconomic figures and have better estimates of the costs and also the benefits. And I want to come back to it in autumn this year. I do hope the enhanced cooperation will not be the solution, but it is the alternative. But what I heard last time from the ministers, no, this is a principal thing, and we need to be all on board. One of the issues of the Equal Treatment Directive is that it does not belong to one concrete, it belongs to one concrete ministry in the member state, but they need also the cooperation of other ministries. This is a horizontal thing, and that makes it more problematic at the level of some member states. And on trafficking in human beings, I don't have such information. So I can come back to you to answer the question after getting more details. Yeah, thank you very much.
Commissioner, thank you. It was a marathon session, and thank you very much for getting through everything. Thank you to colleagues for the comprehensive questions. I know it was not structured, it was just full on every element of your very, very wide portfolio. So thank you very much, colleagues, and we'll see you in a couple of months when the evidence thing is launched, and also I know members are having individual meetings with you.
Mr. Chair, honourable members, thank you very much for your questions, and I am looking forward to future cooperation on the things which we have discussed or some new ones. Thank you.
And all the trilogues. Thank you. Thank you for the work you're doing as well. Okay, colleagues, thank you very much. We got through that very comprehensive session. The last item is postponed, so we go straight to coordinators for now, which are scheduled for 5:30. You're not allowed a break? No. No. Thank you, Vera.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Vera. Thank you very much. Colleagues, we're going to go straight to the coordinators meeting, but if you're not in the coordinators meeting, if you could leave now, and we'll begin when all the coordinators are present. Thank you.